Words are fleeting things. Words, without more words to describe them, are empty in themselves. Images can be iconographic, it can be symbolic. And when that happens, let's say you take an apple, a picture of an apple. Well, are you representing an apple? Or are you representing the story of Adam and Eve? Or are you representing the city of New York? Are you representing, Snow White? Or that eating an apple a day will keep the doctor away? Depending on who you are, all of these different readings can come from just one single image, one single icon. And that's the problem I face, or that's the contention I have with representation that is naturalistic, is that it can get lost in translation. Let's think about like the Mona Lisa, right? You have a painting of the Mona Lisa. The only reason why we know that it's famous and it's expensive and it's, whatever you want to call it, is because we have historical context and we had people to decide that, hey, this is an important painting. Remove history, remove the name of Da Vinci, remove the identity of the person being painted, and that is just another picture of a woman. And not any more important or less important than any other picture of any woman. I mean, there's my grandmother right behind you. And so that is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, right? Kind of like, there's things that you're just not gonna connect with in regards to the meaning and intent behind the work unless I'm sitting there in front of you telling you specifically what that is. So paper trails was an idea that I started working on while I was in grad school with these giant cardboard murals. They would be pieced together. I would paint the composition. And the idea was that it was like a portable mural because you can remove them from the wall and then go reinstall them somewhere else. And that was happening when Arizona was trying to pass a law limiting the amount of undocumented immigrants in the state or their ability to find citizenship. And so paper trails for me was thinking about what it meant to work with paper as a material, but how paper also tends to govern a lot of the things that we do in our daily basis. Oh, you need a vaccine record on paper to get your kid into school. You need your documentation to prove that you're a citizen in this country. You need your papers. I lived on the border for my formative years all the way till for college. And when you live on the border, and people don't know this unless you've been to the border, is that there are checkpoints within the United States that you have to confirm with the Border Patrol and tell them I am a citizen to let you go northbound anywhere from the border. There's also this idea of like the word and the image playing a major role in the way that we spread out stories. And history books are stories, religious texts are stories. And again, we continue to decide what to share and what not to share, what to document, what not to document, what's important, what's not important. And so I take the image and I take the words and I, using paper, which I'm again connected to through one, the access I had to paper as a child, but also paper in the sense of documentation. And I merge them and I push them and I create this ambiguous result that ends up behind me through, again, 3 processes that I'm working on: embellishment, omission, and revision. All of those 3 things are the same type of mechanisms that were used in erasing a lot of our histories as Mexican and Mexican Americans. These pieces came out of a chance happening because I was creating these cutouts, and then the cutouts had a perimeter, the negative space, right, that was left over from the paper where it was cut out. And they had little register marks that I had applied in there so that I could make sure that all the cutouts were remaining the same size. And I was taking those little negatives, the edges of those cutouts, and I was hanging them on the thumbtack. I don't know why I wasn't throwing them out, but I was hanging them. So I was reworking my studio space and changing things up. And then I'm grabbing those and I'm stacking them on the table as I'm taking them off the wall. And then I saw what was happening when they started to overlap. And that was happening randomly because I wasn't hanging them in any particular order. And that was like one of those moments where I was like, if I'm working around these notions of kind of like embellishing, omitting, or kind of rethinking of the order of things in layers, then this is another way that you can approach that. And so these newer pieces have a lot to do with a chance happening in my workspace that I wasn't even aware of, until I started removing them from these little scrap papers into the wall and laying them on top of each other. And that's how I arrived at this body of work. What I'm doing in the projects is trying to engage with that. I mean, through the work is to engage with that process myself, because I feel very strongly that when you engage in a process that you are studying external to yourself, you begin to learn how to pick up on when it's happening in real life. And so I am not making stories, and I am not making images, and I am not trying to convince you of anything. I am only saying that this is the end result of my thinking and my studying of these processes that have taken place over a long period of time, that have had major consequences and continue to have major consequences of where we are at the moment, right? Of who we are. And one of the things that I've kind of learned is to understand that I find myself complete in my incompleteness. That is something important about what my identity is. At the end of the day, one of the people hate that they ask me, well, like, what images and what words are composed into your artwork? And that is my secret to keep, right? And so these are a sharing of that experience. I'm like, well, you have to figure it out. What do I want people to take away from the work? I want them to look at the work, to see what they find in it, to enjoy it, to be able to draw out whatever it is they're going to draw out from it. Because ultimately, once the work leaves my apartment, I'm not standing there explaining anything to anybody. Someone can go to my website, read my artist statement, and that's as far as it goes. I am not concerned of whether these works are archival. I don't care what happens to the work once I'm gone and once I'm dead. I'm not trying to influence people to think one way or another through the artwork itself, because what I'm trying to do is to push away from situations and circumstances that say, this is the way you should do things, or this is the way you should think about certain subject and topics, because each individual should be able to pursue those thought processes on their own and to find to their own conclusions on their own, so long as they're not harming anybody. One of the things that I tell students at the beginning and at the end of the class is everything in our world has been created. Everything in our world at some point has been recreated. And every day that we engage with our world and the way that we react to the world is recreating the world on a daily basis. I was like, so to say that you don't know how to be creative is false, because there's things that you do on a daily basis that it is a moment of creation, even if it is something that is mundane and quotidian, right? Kind of like part of your daily life. You get up in the morning and you have to compose who you are as an individual with the way you comb your hair, the accessories you put on your head, the makeup you wear, the clothes you put on. Every day you're making these choices that are creative in nature. Anytime that you play a video game, there are decisions you're making, there are places you're going, there are power-ups you're gaining that are also requiring you to be creatively thinking about that virtual environment. And so I always tell people, I'm like, if anybody here thinks that they are not creative, you're lying to yourselves, because whatever. And then I give them a certain project and I tell them at the end of the project, look, you told me that you couldn't make, you told me that you couldn't draw, and here you are making and drawing. So creativity, this idea of artistry, is not based on this notion that people are like born with specific traits that make them more creative. Anybody can learn how to make good art. Everybody can learn how to make or develop solid concepts. It's just a matter of how you engage with them. The football player that can design plays to be carried out in the field is engaging in a creative act. The chef that is putting together a meal, which by the way, just activates so many of our senses. It's like an aesthetic fountain, is also engaging in their creative capacity as people. And I think that more people that knew that, the more possibilities were there to kind of understand the world around them and the way that they actually do act upon that world and the way that the world acts upon them. And I think that that's something that kind of goes over people's heads sometimes. Hey, the decisions you make ripple, and the decisions other people make ripple towards you. So it's kind of like having an awareness of that there is other people's creativity affecting you every single day is also an important thing.